Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. QLPOR, as it's widely known, features a bevy of poets, spoken word artists, and live poetry readings with best-selling authors. Your host is Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Good evening, and welcome to the program. Tonight, for your quintessential listening poetry pleasure, acclaimed poet Alison Palmer is here. Alison is the author of the poetry chapbook, Everything is Normal Here, Broadstone Books, 2022, the forthcoming full-length poetry collection, Bargaining with the Fall, also Broadstone Books, January 2023, and the poetry chapbook, The Need for Hiding, Dancing Girl Press, 2018. Her poetic works appear in numerous journals, and she is a recipient of a number of poetry prizes and awards. She writes outside of Washington, D.C. in Rockville, Maryland, which makes her even more outstanding because I live in Washington, D.C., which is near Rockville, Maryland. Welcome, Alison, to the program.
Hi, thank you.
All right, all right. Are you ready to begin this poetic journey?
I am, absolutely.
All right, then. Alison, what is poetry?
What is poetry? All right. So for me, poetry has pretty much always been, I guess, a voice that I consider to be louder than my own voice. And I even use the term voice very loosely. So, in literature, I say that, poetry is written in response to things, pain, beauty, suffering, love. But I'm also an athlete. So I've grown up playing sports. So, you'll hear people say, oh, that play on the soccer field, that was poetry. Or, building a house from start to finish, people can view that as poetry. So I guess I'd say that I believe that where you can find passion and connection, where passion and connection can be found, poetry can be found as well. So that's what I consider poetry, I guess.
All right. Tell me more about the passion and connection. I like that. Just give me a little bit more about that in terms of poetry.
Sure. Well, poetry is passion. Poetry is something very intimate. Poetry is a connection between one person and another person. It can be very singular from the poet to a single reader. It can be very universal. I want it. I'll speak for myself. I want my poetry to connect to a wider audience. First and foremost, I do write for myself out of necessity. But I guess as I grew older and as I get older, I have wanted to share more, to be able to connect more to more and more people. I guess I sort of am coming out of my shell a little bit. People that know me, more of a hermit writer. Right. So I'm stepping out of my comfort zone, even speaking with you right now.
All right, that's okay. We're together. So why is poetry important to all of us? What makes it tick? Why is it important?
Oh man, poetry is so important. Especially, today and in light of our COVID years, again with the connection between people. It's a disconnect and a connection. I think that we share poetry and we read poetry because we're hungry to get lost and we're hungry to be found. People like to get lost in words and in the world that words create. And but in that losing of oneself, you can be found as well. And I like that juxtaposition. Poetry allows people to emote and to express and question. It's something that is a way to record things in your life, feelings, events. You know, I've always recorded things in my life. I've kept journals since I could write. And again, it's just, it allows me to lose myself, and hopefully it does for other people that are looking for that and also looking to be found in some way. Very important.
You know, it's funny. Well, I was going to share that I'm already floored by your way of thinking. You made this statement that it's, I'm lost now, actually. To lost and to be found. I thought that was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Well, let me ask this question. Until I'm on a tangent already.
Yeah.
Is poetry letting your guard down or building a wall?
That's a really interesting question. I think that also for me personally has developed with age. I think in the beginning, poetry wasn't necessarily a wall, but I had a difficult time maybe expressing myself the way I wanted to be expressed. So inadvertently it was a wall. Now it's definitely letting my guard down. It sort of, for me, signifies this allowance of intimacy. Poetry is incredibly intimate. And, you know, in this odd way, I let my guard down because I want readers to believe in me as a poet. For me, if I'm not honest in my poetry, then I'm not honest with myself, and then it pretty much means nothing. But, you know, if readers can believe in me as a poet, then maybe they subsequently can believe in me as a person. So it's this odd need for acceptance in a way, or desire to be known and to be understood. So definitely letting your guard down, or for me, letting your guard down.
You know, people who've listened to me over the course of the last 5 years can always tell when I'm flustered when I hear something brand new.
Okay.
When it just,
all right.
when it touches me, like what you're sharing with me right now. Wow, I've got goosebumps just listening to you talk already. I really do.
Okay.
Just your openness, your honesty, your sense of self around why you write. I'm fascinated, and I want to know more. Please share a poem.
Sure. All right. So I think the first poem I'm going to share does come from the new chapbook, Everything is Normal Here. This, just to preface the book really quickly, you know, like I mentioned, we've had a very strange and difficult few years. So this chapbook was sort of born out of, you know, it describes a fraught world. So what seems to be normal sort of breaks down, which I think we've definitely seen. So the images are a little bit more fantastical, but also grounded. So the first, and that's why it's hard to preface each poem, because they're a little strange. So I'll just start by saying that. Okay, so the first poem I'm going to read is called Point of Touch. Thunder waits for her cue. She falls asleep watching gnats congest the air in clouds darker than the coming storm. She dreams your heart spasms on her tongue, teeth smash down through the night, loudly enough to wake her. Glazes in gifts of heat lightning, electrical thoughts. She can break the sound barrier, but your love has never come as easily. Rain rips the sky, a flock of swallows. She expands the air. Without skin, she's an expendable source. She stretches scissor-like fingers. Cut-out dolls hold hands of air. You try to string them between tree limbs, lightning ashen. The storm's soundful shadows tire everyone beneath. there's a word for how she'll want to forget you, and you will. That's the first poem.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
What inspired the book?
So,
the chapbook?
You know, it was interesting. The book has a lot of older poems in it, and that I sort of repurposed. And the poems that are older came from a sort of difficult time in my life. So they had a little bit, already of this fraught feeling. And when I was thinking about things, emotions, like when I was thinking about sadness, which is an emotional pain, I would connect it to a physical pain, and then thought, okay, well, if we're thinking about sadness or injury, like what do we do if we've injured ourselves? So gauze and Band-Aids, and then I could build a slightly off-kilter image from there to describe the feeling, to describe sadness, for example. I wanted this collection to be a little strange. This is a pretty big departure from my other poetry. I let myself really imagine, and I mentioned more of like fantastic sort of imagery, and like the first poem I read basically personifies thunder. I don't do that normally. Also, people that know me, I love white space and line breaks, so the structure is very different. It's more prose poetry, so not as much thought to line breaks, etc. So I actually had more fun with this chapbook in a way. It wasn't born out of necessity like a lot of my other collections have been.
All right. I'm looking at the cover of your book, actually, right now.
Yeah.
Tell me about the title and also the picture on the cover.
So this is great. I've had this. The picture comes from a block, a wooden block, a small wooden block, square, and my aunt Linda brought it back from Italy. For me, she bought it, I think, in Turin, a street artist who I tried to find, actually. And I've always wanted to use this. I love it. I love the strangeness of this. Actually, one of my favorite things are trees and the sky, so the moon and the sun. And then, everything is normal here, obviously, is not true. So the poems in this collection are normal and they're abnormal. So the title just came pretty easily, and it's simple. So I kind of wanted it to be that. So it just kind of fell together. And then Larry Moore at Broadstone helped me design it, which was fantastic. Yeah.
Well, it's a very striking cover. It really is. It makes you think. Yeah. It makes you wonder, who is this person? I'm going to say it's a guy. I don't know. But it makes you wonder, what is he thinking? Who is he reaching out for? It's quite striking. Now, when you think about... Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
that's all right. Please.
Interesting. The name or the word you see alongside of him, de pazzo. So pazzo means crazy in Italian, although this phrase actually doesn't mean that, but for the longest time that was very fitting to me, was that it said crazy on it.
Wow. I thought that was the person who drew the picture, de Pazzo.
Right. So I looked that up too, thinking, okay, maybe that's his last name. So it was very unable to identify exactly what that is. Right. But most likely that is his last name, I imagine.
All right. Very nice.
Shout out
very
to
nice.
Him.
Yes. Hey, it's perfect. Now, when you think about your entire body of work, what are some of the predominant themes that you write about?
Oh, man. So the first theme definitely would just be relationships, connections that I have formed, that I have failed to form, love. I have a lot of nature related themes for sure, which also just goes back to connection, connecting with not only people, humans, but also nature. Suffering has been a big theme for me. These are fairly simple and I would say universal themes. And so I like that challenge though, because, as they say, everything's been written, right? So the challenge is how to write what's been written in a new way. And so these, hope, these themes, tragedy, trauma, but that's what connects with people. I think are these universal themes, and that's held true for me, I think.
So how does a poem begin for you, Alison? With an idea, a form, or an image?
All of the above. One of the things I do is on my phone, I get a word of the day every day. Mm-hmm. So some of the words I'll already know, some of the words I don't know yet, or I haven't come across, which are obviously the most interesting. I also get a quote of the day. So I try to find different ways to be inspired. Sometimes I'll just sit and I will just think, and that's possibly the most interesting because, again, with the disconnection and connection, that's sort of where I lose myself and find myself at the same time. So really it just depends, to be honest with you.
Well, please share another poem.
Sure. All right. So I'm going to share, I mentioned sadness and gauze. So I'll read the poem that has that imagery in it, and it's called The Rescue. You don't notice my trail of gauze, of placelessness. Eventually, I find my hands to build my body back. They move my limbs around, wrap me up. If I was forced to cut something away, keep in mind a sea star regrows her fifth arm. I'm a means to those small creatures that curl within. They kindle, gloom darkly below my surface. Minutes past the hour. I'm grains of salt set for that sea. At noon, you pick me up from the therapist. Just me, not the sea star. Open field, open room, open my body away. I only find more of emptiness's imprint in all this space. Often it feels good to look back and miss seeing yourself. A pigeon on the sill pecks at glass to test its own reality. Oh, to find buttony eyes and the fascinating language of wings. And that's the second poem.
Alison, what is the purpose of that particular piece? Why did you write it?
Oh, purpose. That's a funny idea, is purpose. So, these poems, I would say, you asked how poems began. A lot of these poems did begin with a first line and just the first idea and first image. So this one, you don't notice my trail of gauze, of placelessness. That's where the idea started, and the rescue, and needing help, I think, basically is the purpose of this poem. Questioning reality, questioning my reality, thinking about who else in nature might question reality. So the pigeon image, and looking for connection. So trying to be saved and find that connection, I think, was the purpose of this poem.
Now, when we think about this book, everything is normal here. What did you learn about yourself writing it? Who are you as a consequence of writing this book?
Yeah, that's really funny because, when I sent this book to try to get some blurbs for the back, I thought that I had actually hidden myself in this collection in particular, because I thought I was looking at the world outside versus my inner world more than I normally do. But I learned that I can't hide, because the endorsements that I got on the back cover, when I got them back, actually laughed and also blushed, because I couldn't trick these other writers into thinking like, I mean, they got exactly what I wanted to say, that I almost didn't know that I wanted to say these things. And they are myself. They are my inner world. So it was very, very strange for me to see other people like this respond. So I learned that I couldn't hide, basically.
Wow. Well, as I said in the beginning of this poetic journey that you floored me, you're my sister from another mother.
No.
Again, I like the way that you think. I really do. The way that you're just so honest, I really appreciate it more than you know. Here's my question.
Yes.
All great writers have great writing influences. Who are some of yours, and what makes them great in your eyes?
So that would be a long list, you know.
All right.
So early influences, I definitely have to credit. So I went to a creative arts school from 7th grade to 12th grade. I was part of the first graduating class at Charleston County School of the Arts in Charleston, South Carolina. So I've had writing mentors since 7th grade, basically. So my teacher at School of the Arts is, I hope she's listening, Renee Buffo-Miles, and she exposed me and exposed us to people like James Dickey, Galway Connell, Stephen Dunn, just these amazing and a lot of Southern writers. But like, you know, I mean, Galway Connell, I mean, I have one of his poems taped to my desk right now. I've got James Dickey's book, you know, on my desk. These are people that I go back to. But then also, you know, C.D. Wright, Forrest Gander. Also, a lot of philosophy. I have Camus on my desk. Whoever I have on my desk, I think have been great influences. And then, you know, also influenced Marjorie Wentworth, is a former poet laureate of South Carolina, has been my mentor for over 20 years, and writers that she's introduced me to as well, and a lot of Southern writers. But then also Virginia Woolf, anybody that writes a lot of stream of consciousness writing, you know, Virginia Woolf is definitely one of my favorite writers. You know, contemporary writers of today, Nils Michaels, Carrie Webster, Alessandra Lynch, Martha Collins. They're just phenomenal. There's too many. Sorry.
It's no problem. I'm smiling because I've recently wrote a poem about Albert Camus. So again, you're close to my heart. You're close to my heart. All right. Now, let's imagine for a moment that a poem is like a cake, all right? What would be some of the most prevalent ingredients that go into the concoction that we call a poem? What would you put in it?
What would I put in it? Like
yes.
Coconut?
No. That's good too. Words, emotions. That's what I'm looking for.
Ingredients to a poem. Oh, yes. You know, I actually that's a really interesting question. Well, words, obviously. And I would say, you know, challenging oneself to find new words. I don't shy away from a thesaurus. You know, synonyms for words. I'll be the first to admit. I look for other words and new words. imagery, I also mentor now. I've been mentoring for a few years. A senior poet, every year from the School of the Arts where I graduated. So it's interesting for me to kind of give back and teach. And I recently had my mentee, worry about, was she getting her meaning across, her point across through the poem. So she sort of tries to wrap the poem up in a neat bow at the end. And I hesitate from saying, well, no, don't do that. If that's a poet's inclination, that's perfectly fine. But I lead with imagery, and I think that a strong poem definitely displays strong imagery for sure. So imagery is a big ingredient for me, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Not
anything else?
Yeah.
Coconut is fine. Vanilla. What else would you like to put in your cake, in your poem? Yeah, what else? Imagery and what else?
Imagery. Yeah, with some chocolate in there. Well, definitely line breaks and white space. I love experimenting with those things. I think that line breaks do a lot of work. Titles do a lot of work. I've had, and I over the years I've forgotten who has said this to me or where I learned this, but that every word and every line should create a world.
Wow.
And that's how I write. I want each line to be a world. So each line has to be able to stand on its own.
Please share with me the titles of 5 of the poems that you've written.
Sure. 5 of the poems that I've written. So, which I actually might read later, I hope.
Okay. All right.
We are not sure. We are not tied to our body's weight on earth. Let's see, one I might not read. Some simple ones would be like salvation. I generally like longer titles. So as if your body believes it's burning. I also have borrowed some lines from other poets. So one of my favorites is a super long line that I'm hoping to read called "Until That Body Wakes, Sir, Finds Itself in the Place It Thought It Was Meant to Be." I definitely like my titles to do work, and I like them to sort of set the theme or the tone in a way.
Well, the reason that I ask, my following question is, what role should a title play for a poem, and what is important to consider when you're titling a poem? That's why I asked for those 5.
Yeah. Again, when I was younger, and I'm thinking even through my 7th through 12th grade years, titles were always very, very difficult for me. And I know writers who still struggle with titles, even now, today, years and years later. And mentoring has really made me think more about titles, because each young person that I have mentored has had really difficult time with titles. So one thing I try to think about, even for myself, when you overwrite or when you need to cut things, I tell this to my mentees, can often find a title in the lines that you don't necessarily quote unquote need. They can sometimes, like if you cut a final line, that can actually become your title. Titles make a reader want to read the poem first and foremost, right? So like any title, like a novel title, a book title, a collection title, you want to be able to draw the reader in. So I like my titles to be very interesting and less simple. In Everything Is Normal Here, all the titles, I believe, are actually one word, maybe two words. So that's something that's also very different for me. I kept this collection very simple title-wise, but in my other collections, the titles are generally longer and even tell a story in themselves before you read.
Wow, very nice. Let's go back in your life, your early life. What was an early experience where you learned that poetic language specifically had power?
Oh, for me, or or my interaction with other people, or
for you.
I mean,
primarily, yes, for you.
Poetic language had power. Well, I mean, that's a lot. That's kind of a heavy question. Poetic language had power. Well, can I tell a story that involves me?
Yes, of course you can.
Okay. So I mean, I've known that poetic language had power almost again since I was aware of poems. Poetry, writing and poetry has always been part of my life. Mostly to record things. I have an issue with the fear of forgetting. Also, I've known for a long time how it does affect other people, and so I've volunteered a lot. And one time in particular, and this was in my early 20s, I did a workshop with a group of sixth grade girls in St. Louis in an inner city school. And just to be brief, by the end of this workshop, I had typed up for each of them. They left with a small collection of their own writing, and these are girls, that didn't get much attention at all. So, in their home lives, at school, they had difficult situations, and they seemed to realize that they had something to say. Being in the situation where I was giving them this platform of poetry to talk about themselves. So yes. Poetic language definitely had power for them, and I saw that. And they were just so proud at the end of the workshop to be able to hold something of themselves, of what they've written about themselves and how they interact with their world. So, that was pretty profound for me.
Please share a poem.
All right. So I'm actually going to switch gears just a little bit. I'm going to read a poem from the collection Bargaining with the Fall that is forthcoming from Broadstone. This book was born out of necessity. My dad had a tragic accident. He had a fall. And then ultimately a year later he passed away. So this book is pretty pretty heavy. But I definitely wrote it out of necessity and dedicated to him and my family. So this poem is called When You Don't Need Me. If I must be a house, I want to be warm and cavernous, your final days. If this must be a story I repeat, let me forget when you did what you told me never to do. Let go. In the dark morning hours, when we'd wake early in our separate states, the birds were brutal. Robins couldn't see to gather food, so they shrilled instead. Maybe I become like a robin now, part of the dawn chorus that begins early in my city beneath the street lamps and corporate buildings. Maybe I let wishing cardinals in my chest go free, if that's what they want. I lose them like I lose you, drawn to an artificial light. That's the end of that poem.
Alison, there are times when I like hearing poems read twice. So if you don't mind, I'd like to hear that one again.
Sure. All right. When you don't need me. If I must be a house, I want to be warm and cavernous, your final days. If this must be a story I repeat, let me forget when you did what you told me never to do. In the dark morning hours, when we'd wake early in our separate states, the birds were brutal. Robins couldn't see to gather food, so they shrilled instead. Maybe I become like a robin now, part of the dawn chorus that begins early in my city beneath the street lamps and corporate buildings. Maybe I let wishing cardinals in my chest go free, if that's what they want. I lose them like I lose you, drawn to an artificial light.
Mm-hmm.
That was a difficult one for you to have a voice there, Michael.
Yes. They say that to see the world with complete honesty, one should look to comedians, musicians, artists, and poets. What do you think emerges naturally from your work? What emerges from you?
Emerges naturally. I like to think honesty and intimacy. I think, especially in these last few years, the development of even more sense of urgency. Again, people that know me, I already have like 3 full-length books waiting in the wings. So I definitely have a sense of urgency, and, what emerges, I hope beauty, and I hope hope emerges.
All right, very nice. Let's take a brief break, and we'll be right back. We are back. I am Michael Anthony Ingram. I'm here with Alison Palmer. Alison, does it hurt you to write poetry? If not, why not?
Oh, poetry hurts.
Talk to me.
Poetry hurts. Poetry, and I think I have this favorite quote of Emily Dickinson's, and it's, where is it? I actually have it here. So she says, if I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. That's been one of my favorite quotes for a very long time. So, it depends on what I'm writing. Obviously, the collection about my dad was pretty much always very painful to write. That hurt. But at the same time, again, with giving myself a voice and giving my family a voice and giving my dad a voice.
Yes.
It was in the end a very beautiful thing to have, and it is a very beautiful thing to own. Writing about loss, writing about love, it all hurts, I think.
Yes. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering when we spoke earlier about the concoction called a cake and a poem, and I'm wondering whether emotions would have gone into that cake in addition to imagery and some of the other things. What do you think?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. That's a big one that I forgot. Emotion. I mean, yeah. I think, and that goes along with honesty. For me, if I'm not connected with my emotions in a poem, you know it. I mean, you can tell when you read a poem that feels empty. So it definitely has to be emotion forward. Yeah.
Well, it brings up a question. What if a poet does not really show emotions or reveal emotions in their work? Can they be called a poet?
I think yes, absolutely, because every poet, every writer, I think, has a role to play, and and so I've questioned myself a lot of times, what poets that speak more to, that have more political bent or political bent or are more focused on just worldly events versus maybe inner-worldly thinking. And I've wondered, gosh, well, like, how does my poetry that's mostly about myself and my interaction with the world, how does that stand up to someone that is writing about wars and what's going on politically in our world today? And I've come to the conclusion that it's all important, and we all speak to certain people and we all speak to certain audiences, and so yes, I do believe that. I don't feel like there's not emotionless poetry. It's just a different kind of emotion. Mm-hmm.
I understand. So much is happening in our world, so much, and I ask this question every single time. So much is happening, the good, the bad, the ugly, as well as the indifferent. So what I'd like to know is, what do you view as being the role of a poet in modern day society?
I don't know that the role is really different today. I think that poets and writers have always wanted to record, I think, first and foremost. We're all kind of historians in a weird way from the very beginning. And so, even though I may not be writing about, what's going on in the Ukraine, somehow it's affecting me, or people that aren't writing about COVID, somehow it is affecting us. So again, I think that a poet's role today is not singular. It's very different. Every poet has a different role and plays a different role, and they are all, whether it's me, having my heart broken versus somebody that's writing about lynchings, or it all matters.
Yes, it does. Please share a poem.
Sure. I'm going to read another one from Bargaining with the Fall, and this is called As If Your Body Believes It's Burning. Basically, it's about my dad, I guess, is really all I really have to say about it. So, As If Your Body Believes It's Burning. The ocean will take care of you, or the first southern snowfall. I don't think about salt in your wounds or quickly melting snow. We play secret skin so neither of us can see. I'm mostly made of bruises. The flames believe in more than gray and ash, glow strong, ignited with gas. Remember how I keep you human. Not every sad white bone will burn. That's the end of that one.
When I listen to you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I hear a world weariness, a longing in your voice. And what I'd like to know is, what is the connection between your speaking voice and your written voice?
Well, you would be right in your comment. The world weariness, and my speaking voice and my writing voice, they're pretty synonymous. But I'm reading you poetry, the past two poems, based out of tragedy. So the weariness is definitely there. So the voice and my voice and the written voice are the same. It's sadness. It's sadness, basically. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be. That's not meant to be a downer.
No, it's not a downer. Not at all. No, I'm thoroughly enjoying you. I really, really am. Do you think you are meant to be a poet?
Yeah. So meant to be. I think that's another one of those phrases that scares me to say. I think that I always knew that I wanted to write, and I've worked very hard to be where I am. I've worked hard to be the poet that I think I am today, and I will continue working very hard to become the poet that I want to be. So I've always known I wanted to write poetry, but meant to be, I hesitate to say yes.
All right. No problem.
Yeah.
Well, what surprises you most about being a poet?
That I never get bored with words.
Tell me more.
Yeah, my love for words actually just gets stronger each day, which I think is very surprising. And I never get tired of stringing words together or writing about, the moon or the heart or my father's story or, relationships. It's a challenge, and I think that it's a privilege to be able to use words. I think that being a poet is a privilege. So yeah, just the love of words can keep growing.
Yes. Some poets claim that a poem is like a living creature, Alison. Once it's out there, there's not much you can do to correct or improve it. Others edit meticulously, not leaving much from the original draft form. What is your take on the editing process?
Oh man, I love editing. I am a
Many
huge
people don't,
supporter.
Alison. Many people don't. Many people
Yeah,
don't like
I know. And my dad was one of those people. He definitely was a one and done. No, I've always loved the writing process. I grew up with the writing process from 7th grade, learned it, and always, I'm very meticulous about each and every single word that I write. It's very deliberate, as much as it is organic in the beginning. It's very organic, and then I just fine tune it. I love editing. I think it's fun.
All right. Please share another poem.
Sure. I'm going to read, the one with the longer title, not the longest title, but we are not tied to our body's weight on earth. So I lift you. You are breath in my cupped hands. You are less than air. Your flowers miss you. I've become how they can't blossom. This time last year, maybe laughter. I think how sorrowful is sorrow's life. I think falling is an instant loss. You're always somewhere behind my eyes. How I wish they were blue like yours. I look in the mirror to own a piece of you. My mouth speaks your name and closes. That's the end of that one.
Wow. Would you read it again for me?
Sure. We are not tied to our body's weight on earth. So I lift you. You are breath in my cupped hands. You are less than air. Your flowers miss you. I've become how they can't blossom. This time last year, maybe laughter. I think how sorrowful is sorrow's life. I think falling is an instant loss. You're always somewhere behind my eyes. How I wish they were blue like yours. I look in the mirror to own a piece of you. My mouth speaks your name and closes.
Have you ever written a poem that humbled or frightened you?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Tell me more.
Yeah, and I think mostly in this collection, that has happened frequently. And I think that, and I've said this before to select people, that I know that one of my poems is good when I feel my chest tighten at the end. And by the end, I mean when I'm closing the poem and I have the last line, and I basically, I guess, kind of like an anxiety attack. But yeah, just numerous times throughout this collection, when it feels like it's not mine, and I look back and read it, and it's like, God, I don't remember writing it, or I didn't write that. That's, to me, that's very humbling and powerful, and I think doesn't happen often, but this collection was, I think, this a singular collection for me.
So if it feels like it's not yours, who does it belong to? To the person that you're writing it about? Is that what you're saying?
That's you might have answered that question, because I don't know whether I've thought about it that deeply. Is if it's not mine, who does it belong to? That's a really good question. Yeah, I would say that in this particular instance, it's not my voice necessarily. It's someone else's. It could be the universe's. It's my dad's voice. It's my family's voice. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily belong to me anymore.
All right. If you can, please tell me about a poem you were proud of writing, but afraid to share for fear of misinterpretation, if you can.
Oh, I'm afraid of misinterpretation. A lot.
All right.
Yeah. That's a hard question.
What makes it hard?
I mean, I feel like every poem that I write is sort of there's a fear of misinterpretation, and not because it's written poorly. Just once you give the poem over to a reader, I like to think it becomes theirs. So there's really a small bit of it's not really misinterpretation, per se. Yeah.
Okay.
I like for the reader to be able to.
You can stop there. You can stop there. I like that. Once you turn it over, you're right. There is the possibility of there being misinterpretation. You're right. I've never heard that before. I like that. Now we've come actually to my favorite part of the program. I view it as being a mini MINI poetry concert. This is your opportunity to share 3 or 4 poems back to back without any interruption from me. No questions, nothing like that. It's your time to take the stage and share 3 or 4 poems. Would you do that for me?
Absolutely, yes. All right. I'm going to read Portrait, and this does come from the chapbook. Everything is normal here. We're designed to break after only years. Architects mistake the heart for strength, the mind for clarity. Inside a glass box, darkness lifts as light fire cracks apart moments. Clouds and sparks, safe in your hands, almost with tenderness. A thin river spreads, too. The box becomes heavier. What the river's for, I've no answer. If you swallow enough water, you'll regain your gills. I'm telling you not to panic. I'm telling you things change. If down has a shape, what will it be? I constantly wait for something to give way. Don't worry, you're cataloged and well chronicled. And then I'm going to read another poem from the chapbook called Ricochet. We know that beneath the meadow is another meadow. Leave these moments tipped forward in our sleep, where we're better. We lean in with as much want. Here, no one can prove us wrong. I let in a little light. Speak to me softly. After that, the bodies collapse, limbs of forgotten gold. Minute inside a second it takes to load a gun, my forehead gone golden from minus time. Raven-lipped, dark, you sound the siren. Each ship made of lanterns brought to shore draws lines and silver edges that tell us where it's safe to sleep. It's not enough to be awake when the world winds away. We try to be re-sewn of nothing left, lovely in our suits of armor. Only the last will be exquisite, will be resought into alkaline or ash. And then if I could, I think this will be my final poem. Is that okay?
Okay. Yes, that's perfect, yes.
Okay. This is the one with that long title that I mentioned earlier. And this is perhaps, like you asked me, Michael, about a poem that didn't feel like mine by the end. So that's why I kind of want to close with this one. And it is from Bargaining with the Fall. And it's called Until That Body Wakes Finds Itself in the Place It Thought It Was Meant to Be. I found myself in a hall of mirrors even night couldn't control. All I wanted was a darkness to cancel out the visions of you upon you. Though in the glass corner I hummed into a hollow that sounded like breathlessness. I met you there, your injury an instrument no one could play anymore. This, you said, meant that you could rest now. But I wanted that place to burn. I lit a match that appeared in my palm as if its reflection would warn us away. Where I wanted to go didn't matter. You wouldn't take my hand. I fled alone, trailing flames, and when I looked back, there was a child. If the child was you, I couldn't tell. My eyes burned from his light. I didn't see you take his hand, but I imagined it was mine, and so I went. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What piece of advice would you give readers of your poetry chapbook, Everything is Normal Here? What advice would you share with them before they start reading?
Oh, let go of everything and just enjoy reading it. Just let go to enjoy the imagery with the chapbook for sure.
All right. What about Bargaining with the Fall? Any advice?
Oh, prepare for a ride. There's it's definitely a mixture of sadness and hope, and I liked it to end with hope, and it does. So, for people that are grieving and looking for connection, but even not grieving, everybody's grieving in a way, just even from this past few years during COVID. So there's a lot to be taken from that book.
All right. Here's my last official question. Writers and poets write for a myriad of reasons. Some write primarily to speak a message to their audience. Others write because to stay silent is not an option. Alison, why do you write?
It's necessary. I can't stay silent, can't stop it.
Well, speaking of that, would you favor us, if you can, with one final piece before we go? I'd really like that. I'd like to hear your voice one more time.
Sure. Let me see if I can. Let me find one that's not so. We'll end on some hope. All right. Okay, I'm going to read the last poem, actually, from the chapbook, but I'm only going to read, it's in four short sections, but I'm going to read just the first first two sections because I like the way it ends there. I think it ends a little more hopeful. This is called The End. In the sinews of our fantasies, waving parts of what we're leaving behind. The way to master death is to make it be everywhere. Late light climbs the limbs again, and geese barely see where they're forced to circle back. If I stand here, brightness outlines what could be my arms. Above, green leaves stray in half shade. I shouldn't be able to gather them, unfixed, penetrable. Pretend I talk in tiny truths. The geese left behind no longer lifts us. I should know the signs. Lost sidles up to convince us. This yard was always here, and it was.
Alison.
Into that one. Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Where can listeners find your work?
I have a website. That's my name, AlisonPalmer.org. 1L, A-L-I, which is sometimes strange. I have poems available on there that have been published online. So that's probably the best place to find them. Also, the Broadstone Books website is where you can purchase Everything is Normal Here, the chapbook, and then eventually the full length.
All right, very nice. How can listeners stay in touch with you? I guess through your website, probably.
Yeah, through my website. You can contact me through there as well, so you can also send me an email.
All right. What's next for you, Alison? Where do you go from here?
Oh, keep writing, Michael. Where do I go?
Keep writing.
Tomorrow I'll be up writing, absolutely.
There's one question I got to ask. Here we go. Have your favorite poems arrived, or are they still on their way that you've written?
Oh, they'll always be. I guess they'll always be more favorites as long as I can write. Right? I mean,
yes.
Yeah. I hope so. I hope they're in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we've reached the end of our poetic journey, Alison Palmer, and I want to thank you so much for spending time with me. I learned so much.
Thank you.
I always like learning new things. I really, really do. You are a poetic star, and I hope our paths cross in a real way, face to face. I really like that.
I think so.
I really like that. Yes.
Thank
you. Yes. Well, again, I want to thank you for joining me tonight. It was an excellent program. The books are out there on Broadstone. Alison Palmer, she's the star of the hour. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in as you do every week. And as I share every week, let poetry ring somewhere throughout the land. Good night, everyone. Good night, Alison.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio, is available on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. You can also check out the website at QLPOR.com.